My name's James LUTALO. I am the Tourism Component Coordinator under the Competitiveness and Enterprise Development Project. It's a World Bank funded project under the ministry. The ministry is a beneficiary on one of the components that is specifically called the Tourism Competitiveness and Product Development. I am the immediate former Director for Tourism, Wildlife and Antiquities, but retired and I'm now working on a project. So you're welcome. I have been asked to give an overview of the Uganda tourism sector in light of external funding. And this is one of the activities in commemoration of the World Tourism Day that will come on the 27th of September, where Uganda is expected to join the rest of the world to celebrate it, and whose main focus is to foster awareness among the global community on the importance of tourism and its social, cultural, political and economic value. And this year's theme is Tourism for Inclusive Growth. And of course, we are told it will be an opportunity to look beyond the statistics. Unfortunately, we are celebrating the World Tourism Day in the midst of a pandemic, and therefore many of the assumptions that were made with regard to the topic that I'm going to focus on have been affected, because they have affected the economy, they have affected government releases and earning. The presentation is the Ugandan tourism sector in light of external funding, and I'm required to give insights on how the tourism sector is achieving sustainable development goals through partnerships with the global community. And this is aimed at ensuring that we have inclusive growth, and we look at the public sector, the private sector, and the communities that live close to the tourism resources or products that we have in Uganda. Allow me to briefly focus on the following 5 areas with regard to this presentation. I'll give a very brief overview of the tourism sector, but of course skewing it towards the topic that you've asked me to deliver. I'll look at the Uganda's comprehensive policy and planning framework, because these are the ones that form the basis for Uganda to implement international instruments, international policy frameworks, and they are the basis on which donors come to provide support. We look at resource mobilization in terms of how do we do it, in terms of making sure that whatever appears in the comprehensive policy framework is broken down into activities that are annualized. We look at the key country and development partner frameworks that are the basis for our cooperation with the development partners, for them to be able to provide funding for the tourism sector. I finally also look at the challenges that we have experienced. It is useful to give you a little bit of an insight on the challenges, because we had initial assumptions which are no longer tenable given what has happened. Now, in terms of the tourism sector, it looks at how do we sell Uganda, how do we attract people to Uganda, and in doing so we provide services. As we do so, we create jobs. We resolve issues that we have come out to focus on in the development framework, and that's poverty alleviation. So tourism is government-led but private sector driven. What do we mean by government-led? Government brings out the policies and regulations, the guidelines. It provides the last mile infrastructure. It markets the country. It provides safety, and of course ensures the quality of the tourism products and services that we are going to ensure that we give out as a country to our visitors. So tourism focuses on the source and the destination. Uganda happens to be the destination, but there are source markets, and Uganda must market itself in the source markets if they are to get people coming to visit. And therefore we are able to contribute to the bigger result of increasing household incomes, creating jobs, and reducing poverty. Now, tourism in Uganda has the potential to contribute to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So those are some of the key areas that we contribute to as a sector. For the sake of this presentation, allow me to read them. Goal 1, which is zero poverty. Goal 2, which is gender equality. And remember the theme of this year's celebration that calls for this. There is Goal 7, which talks about access to affordable, reliable, and sustainable and modern energy. Goal 8, which is decent work and economic growth. Goal 12, which is responsible consumption and production. Goal 13, which is climate actions. Remember, we have our major products being wildlife, and they are in very fragile environments. Goal 14, which is sustainable use of oceans and marine resources. We have one of the biggest lakes in Africa, which is a tourism product, and we have to ensure that we have sustainably used it. And Goal 5, which is to protect, restore, and promote sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems. Many of our protected areas are in savanna areas, and then we have to sustainably manage our forests. We have forest national parks, and we have to protect against degradation and biodiversity loss. The tourism sector, I will only quote statistics for 2017, has grown steadily. And in 2017, we received 1.4 million arrivals, and the sector accounted for 7.3% of Uganda's gross domestic product. We created more than 600,000 jobs in the sector, and the sector was the leading foreign exchange earner, and in 2017 generated 1.4 billion. What are the challenges? And I bring up the challenges because they are the basis for us to have plans and strategies that we put out there for the donors to come and fund. Our assets, our tourism assets, are biodiversity based, and some of them are cultural. Unfortunately, they are underutilized because of the limited participation of the private sector. Remember, I told you that it is government led, but is private sector driven. If you do not have the private sector participating, then you do not have a sector that is vibrant. Now, the other key challenge is that the last mile public infrastructure investments in national parks and others limit the scope of investments. Do we have the right roads to these protected areas? Do we have the right ICT systems and framework? Do we have the correct safety? Do we have the right products? Do we have the right quality in those that come and invest in our areas? Now, the ministry is cognizant of the fact that it has to execute its mandate, and has appreciated the requirement to collaborate with stakeholders, including donors. And to do so, it is guided by the Comprehensive National Policy and Planning Framework. The key policy framework is Vision 2040 that was approved by government in 2007, and the key theme of that vision is to have a transformed Ugandan society, transforming it from a peasant to a modern and prosperous country within 30 years. Now, to do so, it provides development paths, it provides strategies, and it operationalizes that vision through actions and strategies. It identified tourism as one of the opportunities in addition to oil and gas, ICT, minerals, business, labor force, and so on. This vision is implemented by 5-year national development plans that aim to propel Uganda from within the medium to long term. Now, the other aspects of the comprehensive national planning framework include the tourism sector policies and plans. It would be useful for one to know that, for example, right now we have the Ministry's Strategic Plan 2020-2021 to 2024-2025, and it provides the basis for which the Ministry seeks to achieve medium-term and long-term tourism development through wildlife and cultural heritage conservation. Now, it aligns with NDP3 and the vision that I have talked about, plus the NRM manifesto. All these ensuring that we have a synchronized way of developing the country, but using tourism as a program. Now, this sector investment plan, as you might already be aware, because it is implementing NDP3. NDP3 ceased to look at sectors, it looks at programs. So it moves away from that silo approach to an alignment across government. It adopts a cross-sector approach. It looks at issues of coordination and exploiting synergies. Now, it also helps in the monitoring and evaluation of those results that one seeks to achieve through projects that are implemented. Now, the sector investment plan, like I said, is to help us implement the targets of NDP3, for example, now, which is program-based. And remember, NDP3 is implementing Vision 2040. So those are the planning frameworks that at national level we look at. Now, in terms of donor resource mobilization strategies for the tourism sector, we focus on country and development partner frameworks, especially those that are relevant to the tourism sector. These might be multilateral or bilateral. An example of a multilateral framework is the enhanced integrated framework that right now is supporting the ministry under the handicraft and souvenir development project. And I think you've already had a discussion with them. So that is an example of a framework where we are using a multilateral approach to help Uganda develop the communities as partners through crafts and souvenirs. There are bilateral frameworks. We have the United Nations Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework. We have the US-Uganda Country Cooperation Strategy 2016-2021, and we have the Uganda Country Partnership Framework with the World Bank. These are the ones that guide the tourism sector in terms of developing resources or strategies and projects that we put out there to show donors that we are implementing sustainable development goals as part of our contribution. And given that their agendas look at those countries that will contribute to those, then the donors come into focus on what we have done as Uganda. I've already given the example of the enhanced integrated framework. Now, of particular importance for the tourism sector is the World Bank Uganda Country Partnership Framework, on the basis of which we have had two important projects. The first one is the Competitiveness and Enterprise Development Projects, the one I told you where I'm the tourism component coordinator. Now, this one has helped Uganda to to focus on the achievements, especially with regard to the Sustainable Development Goals. With regard to tourism, it is helping us to address the governance challenges. Remember, government leads, but one of its focuses is to provide governance for the sector. So it focuses on the governance challenges within the tourism sector. The other challenge that this comprehensive framework is looking at are the infrastructure deficits. Remember, this project is supposed to help government put these two in place so that we attract the private sector to invest within tourism. Now, the World Bank is supporting government to address those two, and CEDEP is part of the project that is implemented under the Comprehensive Country Partnership Framework. It seeks to strengthen Uganda's core tourism offerings and to leverage our tourism assets for private sector-led growth. And this will be achieved through 4 outputs. One of them is upstream planning, policy and regulatory capacity building. The second one is targeted infrastructure improvements to incentivize private sector-led management and revenue generation. The third one is to use incentives for the ministry to mobilize private investment. These are called the disbursement-linked indicators, that government is required to achieve certain targets if it is to get the next batch of funding. The fourth one is to look at local hiring and training of youth. In the case of the tourism sector, we have 2 training institutions. One is in Jinja, that's the Uganda Hotel and Tourism Training Institute. The other one is the Uganda Wildlife Research and Training Institute, based in Kasese. Those 2 will help in the delivery of this output. Now, all our activities require that we do assessment of climate change vulnerabilities and require us to propose specific measures where we would reduce carbon footprint of especially the infrastructure that will be developed under this project. Now, of course, this project recognizes the contribution of the sector, and I will not get back to there. Now, some of the benefits we hope to get out of this will be a tourism information management system. This is provide data that is needed by the private sector to do investments, because we are trying to attract investment. But it also guides the government on what information, what monitoring and evaluation to carry out based on the proper statistics. And it is this system that will generate it. We hope to have improved management performance, especially of the ministry and its core tourism-related institutions, through enhanced planning, coordination, training, promotion of the country, and awareness building. Now, the project also is completing activities that were started under the original CEDEP. This component, this one now that we are implementing, is called the CEDEP additional funding. The original project started, I think, in 2013 and provided infrastructure for the Uganda Hotel and Training Institute. It is building a 3-star hotel. They have completed 50 rooms. Now the additional funding is required to do an additional 30 rooms for that hotel. So that is part of the completion of the activities, but to also make those that were started under the original CEDEP much more sustainable. Now, in terms of the objective, it is to support measures that will increase private sector investment in the sector, but also to strengthen the effectiveness of the land system, because the lands is the other component in addition to tourism. It focuses on outcomes that will be directly attributable to the project and will allow for implementation. Now, what are the challenges with regard to CEDEP-AF, because this is where donors are coming in? Now, usually these projects have to be declared effective. Now, for them to be declared effective, governments must put in place certain frameworks. Now, the project was delayed by over 14 months. And so the original assumptions that we would be able to make a number of achievements have been affected by the delay in 14 months. But you also know that we've had COVID, especially the second wave, which has affected Uganda's earnings. It has affected the way people and tourists come into the country. And so the results framework, where we thought that by implementing this project we would increase the visitation of visitors or tourists to Uganda, has been affected. It has to be reviewed because there was a lockdown in terms of those that could travel. So the project was declared, the project appraisal document came out before COVID, and those are some of the challenges that must be addressed because these were not foreseen. The budget cuts were not foreseen. So in terms of donor financing of the tourism sector, that is a key project. The other key project under World Bank that is using the same comprehensive framework is called investment or investing in forests and protected areas for climate smart development. Now, this is implemented by the Ministry of Water and Environment, the ministry here, UWA, and the National Forest Authority. Now, it is based on the fact that both UWA and NFA, or Uganda Wildlife Authority, and the National Forest Authority recognizes that more value could be generated from protected areas through tourism, and they have identified the need for improved tourism infrastructure. Just like we have said that government must provide the last mile infrastructure if you have to attract the private sector to come and invest. Now, the project development objective of this one is to promote sustainable management of forests and protected areas for increased benefits to communities from forests, especially in the Albertine Rift, for eradication of increased vulnerability of economic productivity, biodiversity, and livelihoods to climate change effects due to declining forestry and ecosystems, goods and services. I think you know that one of the issues affecting Uganda is deforestation. And with forests going away, we have issues of climate change that come with us. So this is a 6-year project, and will be primarily implemented in 37 districts that are surrounding 7 national parks. It will be implemented in 4 wildlife reserves. It will be implemented in 28 central forest reserves, and 16 of which are refugee hosting districts. Refugees are known for cutting down trees in order to get wood fuel. And briefly, that is what the Ugandan tourism sector would talk about with regard to external funding. So the key issues in there have been that we must rely on Uganda's comprehensive national planning framework, which is guided by global frameworks. We must rely on us having developed partnerships with development partners on the frameworks that form the basis of the projects that we would be implementing. So briefly, that is what we would have. And for us during the World Tourism Day, inclusive growth would mean that we have made a contribution through one CEDEP, the handicraft and souvenir development project, as well as the investments in forest and protected area systems for climate smart development. I think I'll end my brief talk here. Thank you very much.